It's Bible study. Genesis chapter 31, 32. Jacob's departure, wrestling with God. Real life, real answers. How do I leave a toxic situation? What do I do when I'm afraid of the future? Can I pray honestly when I'm scared? Why does God let me struggle? Can God change who I am? Is God still with me during uncertainty? What if I feel alone? These are some of the questions that we all might be struggling with, issues, problems. We can definitely get some wisdom from these chapters and apply them to our life to help us hurdle these challenges. Again, this is something I think that is very intriguing, and hopefully it helps uh, people out there not just reading the Bible, but taking wisdom from the Bible. Let's get started. Hopefully, the fan on my laptop is not too loud. Actually, you know what? Let me just turn it off. I think I had it in. Yeah, it's in game mode. Let's see. There we go. Hopefully, that works out better. Alrighty, let's go. Genesis, King James Version. We're on chapter 31, verse 1. And he heard the words of Laban's sons, saying, Jacob had taken away all that was our father's, and of that which was our father's hath he gotten all this glory. Study notes. Jacob hears complaints from Laban's sons. They accuse him of taking their father's wealth. This shows rising tension and jealousy because of Jacob's success. Genesis 31:2. And Jacob beheld the countenance of Laban, and behold, it was not toward him as before. Jacob notices Laban's attitude has changed. Laban is no longer friendly or supportive. This shows growing tension and signals that it may be time for Jacob to leave. Looks like I believe he said his kids, right? Kind of got in his head, and they were having a great relationship, and now he's got him. The kids made him kind of get envious of him or jealous of him or feel like he's still in his thunder. Genesis 31:3. And the Lord said unto Jacob, Return unto the land of thy fathers and to thy kindred, and I will be with thee. God speaks directly to Jacob. He tells him to go back home. God promises to be with him, giving guidance and reassurance. Genesis 31:4. And Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah to the field unto his flock. Jacob calls Rachel and Leah to meet him privately. He brings them away from the household to speak freely. This prepares them for an important decision about leaving Laban. And is on silent. Genesis 31:5. And said unto them, I see your father's countenance, countenance, that it is not toward me as before, but the God of my father had been with me. Jacob explains the situation to Rachel and Leah. He notices Laban's attitude has changed towards him. Jacob recognizes that God has still been faithful and with him. Genesis 31:6. And ye know that with all my power I have served your father. Jacob reminds Rachel and Leah of his hard work. He emphasizes that he served Laban faithfully and with full effort. This shows Jacob defending his integrity and honesty. Genesis 31:7. And your father had deceived me and changed my wages 10 times, but God suffered him not to hurt me. Jacob says Laban repeatedly changed his pay unfairly. Despite this, God protected Jacob from being harmed. This shows God's protection even in unfair situations. Genesis 31:8. If he said thus, the speckle shall be thy wages, then all the cattle bear speckled. And if he said thus, the ringstrait shall be thy hire, then bear all the cattle ringstrait. Jacob explains how the flocks kept producing what Laban tried to give him. Whenever Laban changed the agreement, the animals still matched Jacob's wages. This shows God's blessing overriding human manipulation. Genesis 31:9. Thus God had taken away the cattle of your father and given them to me. Jacob explains that God is the one who caused his increase. The livestock that increased was ultimately God's blessing, not just human effort. This shows God's role in protecting and providing for Jacob. Genesis 31:10. And it came to pass at the time that the cattle conceived that I lifted up mine eyes and saw in a dream, and behold, the rams which leaped upon the cattle were ring-streaked, speckled, and grislim. Jacob shares a dream he had during breeding time. He sees animals with specific patterns, speckled, striped, spotted. This shows God was guiding even what seemed like a natural process. Genesis 31:11. And the angel of God spake unto me in a dream, saying, Jacob. And I said, Here am I. God sends a message through an angel in a dream. Jacob responds immediately, showing readiness to listen. This shows clear communication from God to guide Jacob. Ooh, feel a little goosebumps there. Genesis 31:12. And he said, Lift up now thine eyes and see all the rams which leap upon the cattle are ring-streaked, speckled, and gristled. For I have seen all that Laban doeth unto thee. God shows Jacob what is happening with the flocks. He reveals that he has seen how Laban treated Jacob. This shows that God is aware of injustice and is actively working on Jacob's behalf. Genesis 31:13. I am the God of Bethel, where thou anointest the pillar, and where thou a vow unto me. Now arise, get thee out from this land, and return unto the land of thy kindred. God reminds Jacob of his past commitment at Bethel. He connects this moment to God's earlier promise and Jacob's vow. God clearly tells Jacob it's time to leave and go back home. Genesis 31:14. And Rachel and Leah answered and said unto him, Is there yet any portion or inheritance for us in our father's house? Rachel and Leah respond to Jacob's plan. They feel disconnected from their father's household. This shows they are open to leaving with Jacob. Genesis 31:15. And are we not counted of him strangers? For he had sold us and had quite devoured also our money. Rachel and Leah feel mistreated by Laban. They believe their father treated them like outsiders. This strengthens their decision to leave with Jacob. Genesis 31:16. For all the riches which God had taken from our father, that is ours and our children's. Now then, whatsoever God hath said unto thee, do. Rachel and Leah agree that what God has given Jacob is rightfully theirs too. They accept that God has blessed Jacob and their family. They fully support Jacob obeying God's command to leave. Genesis 31:17. Then Jacob rose up and set his sons and his wives upon camels. Jacob begins the journey to leave. He organizes his family for travel. This shows preparation and obedience to God's instruction. Genesis 31:18. And he carried away all his cattle and all his goods which he had gotten, the cattle of his getting which he had gotten in Padanaram, for to go to Isaac his father in the land of Canaan. Jacob takes everything he has gained with him. He is heading back to his father's Isaac in Canaan. This shows a full transition back to his homeland. Genesis 31:19, and Laban went to shear the sheep, and Rachel had stolen the images that were her father's. Laban is all away tending to sheep, shearing. Excuse me. Rachel secretly takes her father's household idols, images. This adds tension as the family leaves without Laban knowing everything. Genesis 31:20, and Jacob stole away unawares to Laban the Syrian, in that he told him not that he fled. Jacob leaves secretly without telling Laban. Laban is unaware that Jacob has fled. This shows the urgency and tension in Jacob's departure. Genesis 31:21. So he fled with all that he had, and he rose up and passed over the river and set his face toward the Mount Gilead. Jacob leaves quickly with everything he owns. He crosses a river and travels toward Mount Gilead. This marks a decisive break from Laban's household. Genesis 31:22, and it was told Laban on the third day that Jacob was fled. Laban finds out about Jacob's departure after 3 days. Jacob already has a head start in travel. This sets up Laban's pursuit in the next verses. Genesis 31:23, and he took his brethren with him and pursued after him 7 days' journey, and they overtook him in the Mount Gilead. Laban gathers his men and goes after Jacob. He travels for 7 days trying to catch him. Laban finally catches up with Jacob in the area of Mount Gilead. Genesis 31:24, and God came to Laban the Syrian in a dream by night and said unto him, Take heed that thou speak not to Jacob either good or bad. God appears to Laban in a dream. He gives a clear warning not to harm or pressure Jacob. This shows God protecting Jacob during Laban's pursuit. Genesis 31:25, then Laban overtook Jacob. Now Jacob had pitched his tent in the mount, and Laban with his brethren pitched in the mount of Gilead. Laban finally catches up with Jacob. Both camps set up tents near each other. This prepares for a face-to-face confrontation between them. Genesis 31:26, and Laban said to Jacob, What hast thou done, that thou hast stolen away unawares to me, and carried away my daughters as captives taken with the sword? Laban confronts Jacob. He accuses Jacob of secretly leaving and taking his daughters. Laban exaggerates, describing them like captives taken by force. Genesis 31:27, Wherefore didst thou flee away secretly and steal away from me? And didst not tell me that I might have sent thee away with mirth and with songs, with tabret and with harp? Laban questions why Jacob left in secret. He claims he would have given Jacob a joyful farewell. This shows Laban's presenting himself in a better light than his past behavior. Genesis 31:28, and has not suffered me to kiss my sons and my daughters. Thou hast now done foolishly in so doing. Laban complains he didn't get to say goodbye. He accuses Jacob of acting foolishly. This continues Laban's emotional and confrontational tone. Genesis 31:29, It is in the power of my hand to do you hurt, but the God of your father spake unto me yesternight, saying, Take thou heed that thou speak not to Jacob either good or bad. Laban admits he has the power to harm Jacob, but he is restrained because God warned him in a dream. This shows God's protection over Jacob even in danger. Genesis 31:30, and now though thou yet wherefore hast thou stolen my gods? Laban admits Jacob wanted to return home, but he accuses Jacob of stealing his household idols, gods. This introduces a new conflict in the story involving the stolen items. Genesis 31:31, and Jacob answered and said to Laban, Because I was afraid, for I said, Peradventure thou wouldest take by force thy daughters from me. Jacob explains why he left secretly. He was afraid Laban would take his wives back by force. This shows Jacob acted out of fear, not disrespect alone. Genesis 31:32. With whomsoever thou findest thy gods, let him not live before our brethren. Discern thou what is thine with me, and take it to thee, for Jacob knew not that Rachel had stolen them. Jacob strongly denies stealing Laban's idols. He unknowingly puts a serious curse on whoever has them. The verse explains that Jacob does not know Rachel took. Genesis 31:33. And Laban went into Jacob's tent and into Leah's tent and into the two maidservants' tents, but he found them not. Then went he out of Leah's tent and entered into Rachel's tent. Laban searches every tent in Jacob's camp. He checks Leah's and the servants' tents first. He then goes into Rachel's tent, continuing the search for the stolen items. Genesis 31:34. Now Rachel had taken the images and put them in the camel's furniture and sat upon them, and Laban searched all the tent but found them not. Rachel hides the stolen household idols. She cleverly places them where Laban would not easily find them. Laban searches but cannot discover what was taken. Genesis 31:35. And she said to her father, let it not displease my Lord that I cannot rise up before thee, for the custom of woman is upon me. And he searched but found not the images. Rachel gives an excuse for not standing up. She claims she is in her menstrual period, which keeps Laban from checking carefully. Laban searches but still cannot find the idols. Genesis 31:36. And Jacob was wroth and with Laban. And Jacob answered and said to Laban, what is my trespass? What is my sin that thou hast so hotly pursued after me? Jacob becomes angry and confronts Laban. He asks what wrongdoing he has committed. Jacob challenges why Laban pursued him so aggressively. Genesis 31:37. Whereas thou hast searched all my stuff, what hast thou found of all thy household stuff? Set it here before my brethren and thy brethren, that they may judge betwixt us both. Jacob challenges Laban directly. He asks Laban to show any evidence of wrongdoing. Jacob wants witnesses to judge fairly between them. Genesis 31:38. This 20 years have I been with you. Thy ewes and thy sheep goats have not cast their young, and the rams of thy flock have I not eaten. Jacob reminds Laban of 20 years of service. He says he took care of the flocks without harming them. This shows Jacob defending his honesty and hard work. Genesis 31:39. That which has torn a beast I brought not unto thee. I bear the loss of it of my hand. Didst thou require it, whether stolen by day or stolen by night? Jacob explains his responsibility as a shepherd. If animals were attacked by wild beasts, he personally took the loss. Laban still made him account for every loss, showing how strict the agreement was. Genesis 31:40. Thus I was in the day the drought consumed me, and the frost by night, and my sleep departed from mine eyes. Jacob describes the hard conditions he worked under. He endured extreme heat by day and cold by night. He worked so hard that he often could not sleep. Genesis 31:41. Thus have I been 20 years in thy house. I served thee 14 years for thy two daughters, and 6 years for thy cattle, and thou hast changed my wages 10 times. Jacob summarizes his 20 years for Laban. He worked 14 years for his wives and 6 years for livestock. He again points out that Laban kept changing his pay unfairly. Genesis 31:42. Except the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac have been with me. Surely thou hast sent me away now empty. God has seen mine affliction and the labor of my hands, and rebuked thee yesternight. Jacob gives credit to God for protecting him. Without God, he says he would have left with nothing. God saw his suffering and corrected Laban in a dream. And Laban answered and said unto Jacob, this is Genesis 31:3, these daughters are my daughters, and these children are my children, and these cattle are my cattle, and all that thou seest is mine. And what can I do this day unto these my daughters, or unto their children which they have borne? Laban claims everything still belongs to him. He speaks emotionally about his daughters and grandchildren. Even so, he admits he cannot do harm to them now. Genesis 31:44. Now therefore, come thou, let us make a covenant, and thou, and let it be for a witness between me and thee. Laban proposes a peace agreement with Jacob. He suggests making a covenant, a formal agreement. This is meant to settle their conflict and establish peace. Genesis 31:45. And Jacob took a stone and set it up for a pillar. Jacob responds to the agreement. He sets up a stone as a marker. This stone becomes a symbol of the covenant between them. Genesis 31:46. And Jacob said unto his brethren, gather stones. And they took stones and made an heap, and they did eat there upon the heap. Jacob asked others to gather stones. They build a stone pile together. They share a meal there, showing a moment of agreement and peace. Genesis 31:47. And Laban called it Girgar Sal Hadutha, but Jacob called it Galid. Laban and Jacob give the place different names. Laban uses his language and Jacob uses his own. Both names are related to the idea of a witness or memorial between them. Genesis 31:48. And Laban said, this heap is a witness between me and thee this day. Therefore was the name of it called Galid. Laban declares the stone heap and a witness between them. It marks their agreement and separation. The place is called Galid, meaning heap of witness. Forgive me. Genesis 31:49. And Mizpah, where he said, the Lord watch between me and thee when we are absent one from another. This place is called Mizpah, meaning watchtower. It is a prayer for God to watch over both parties. This reflects a desire for peace and accountability, even when apart. Genesis 31:50. If thou shalt afflict my daughters, or if thou shalt take other wives beside my daughters, no man is with us. See, God is witness between me and thee. Laban warns Jacob to treat his daughters well. He emphasizes faithfulness in marriage and care for the family. He says God is the witness between them, showing an accountability together. Genesis 31:51. And Laban said to Jacob, behold this pillar, which I have cast betwixt me and thee. Laban points to the stone heap and pillar. These objects mark the boundary between him and Jacob. It symbolizes a formal separation and agreement. Genesis 31:52. This heap be witness, and this pillar be witness that I will over this heap to thee, and that thou shalt not pass over this heap and this pillar unto me for harm. The heap and pillar act as a bond. Both sides agree not to cross it with harmful intent. This sets clear limits to avoid future conflict. Genesis 31:53. The God of Abraham and the God of Noah and the God of their father judge between us. And Jacob swear by the fear of his father Isaac. Laban calls on God as the final judge between them. Jacob responds by making an oath and in reverence to his father Isaac's God. This confirms the agreement in serious and before God. Genesis 31:54. Then Jacob offered sacrifice upon the mount and called his brethren to eat bread. And they did eat bread and tarried all night in the mount. Jacob makes a sacrifice to God. A meal is shared as part of the agreement. They spend the night together peacefully, showing the conflict is settling. Genesis 31:55. And early in the morning, Laban rose up and kissed his sons and his daughters and blessed them. And Laban departed and returned unto his place. Then he announced Laban says goodbye to his family. He blesses his daughters and grandchildren. Then he returns home, ending the confrontation peacefully. Alrighty, that's Genesis 31. Now we'll start Genesis 32. 1. And Jacob went on his way, and the angels of God met him. Jacob continues his journey after leaving Laban. He is met by angels, showing God's presence with him. This gives Jacob reassurance that he is not alone on his journey. Genesis 32:2. And when Jacob saw them, he said, This is God's host. And he called the name of that place Manan. Mananian. Jacob recognizes the angels as God's army or camp. He realizes God has protected him. He names the place he names the place Mahanaim, meaning two camps, showing both his camp and God's camp are together. Genesis 32:3. And Jacob sent messengers before him to Esau, his brother, unto the land of Seir, the country of Edom. Jacob sends messengers ahead of him. He is preparing to meet his brother Esau. This shows Jacob's trying to approach the situation carefully and respectfully. Genesis 32:4. And he commanded them, saying, Thus shall ye speak unto my lord Esau, thy servant. My servant Jacob said, Thus I have sojourned with Laban and stayed there until now. Jacob gives instructions for what to say to Esau. He humbly refers to himself as Esau's servant. He explains he has been living with Laban until now. Genesis 32:4. And I have oxen and asses, flocks, and men servants and women servants. And I have sent to tell my Lord that I may find grace in thy sight. Jacob tells Esau about his wealth and family. He sends word to show respect and honesty. His goal is to find favor and peace with Esau. Genesis 32:6. And the messengers returned to Jacob, saying, We came to thy brother Esau, and also he cometh to meet thee, and 400 men with him. Genesis 32:7. Then Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed, and he divided the people that was with him, and the flocks and herds, and the camels into two bands. Jacob becomes afraid and stressed. He prepares possible danger from Esau. He divides his group into two camps, reduce risk. Genesis 32:8. And said, If Esau come to the one company and smite it, then the other company which is left shall, if Esau attacks one group, the other may serve. Jacob creates a backup plan. This shows Jacob using practical wisdom in a fearful situation. Genesis 32:9. And Jacob said, O God of my father Abraham, and God of my father Isaac, the Lord which says unto me, Return unto thy country and to thy kindred, and I will deal well with thee. Genesis 32:10. I am not worthy of the least of all the mercies and of all the truth which thou hast told unto thy servant, for with my staff I passed over is Jordan, and now I am become two bands. Jacob humbles himself before God. He admits he does not deserve God's kindness. He reflects on how God has grown him from nothing into a large family. Genesis 32:11. Deliver me, I pray thee, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, and I fear him, lest he will come and knit me and the mother with children. Jacob prays for protection. He is afraid of Esau's and what he might do. He asks God to protect his entire family. He is afraid and what he might do. Jacob prays for protection. Genesis 32:12. Forgive me, and thou says, I will surely do thee good, and make thy seed as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude. Oops, sorry. Jacob reminds God of his promise. God promised to bless him and make his descendants very numerous. Jacob holds on to God's promise as he faces fear. Genesis 32:13. And Jacob lodged there that same night and took a bed which came to his hand, a present for Esau. His boyfriend Jacob stops and rests for the night. He prepares a gift for Esau. This is the part of his plan for to bring peace and reduce tension with Esau. Genesis 32:14, 200 she goats and 20 he goats, 200 ewes, and 20 rams. Jacob prepares a large gift for Esau. He selects goats and sheep in specific numbers. This shows Jacob's effort to bring peace through generosity. Genesis 32:15. 30 milch camels with their colts, 39 and 10 bulls, 20 asses, and 10 foals. Jacob adds more animals to the gift for Esau. The gift includes camels, cattle, and donkeys. This shows Jacob trying to make a strong peace offering. Genesis 32:16, and he delivered them into the hand of his servants. Every drove by themselves, and said unto his servants, Pass over before me, and put a space betwixt drove and drove. Jacob organizes the animals into separate groups. He sends his servants ahead, which with each group he spaces them out to make the gift more impactful for each. Genesis 32:17, and he commanded the foremost, saying, When Esau, my brother, meet thee and ask thee, saying, Whose art thou, and whither goest thou, and whose are these before thee? Jacob gives instructions to the first group of the servants. He prepares them for Esau's protection. Questions. This shows Jacob carefully planning how to approach Esau. Like feeling the sleep. Genesis 32:18. That thou shalt say, They be thy servant Jacob's. It is a present sent unto my lord Esau, and behold, also he is behind us. Jacob tells his servants what to say to Esau. They are to present the animals as a gift from Jacob. Jacob himself is following behind, preparing to meet Esau personally. Genesis 32:19, and so commanded he the second and the third, and all that followed the droves, saying, On this manner shall ye speak unto Esau when ye find him. Jacob repeats the same instructions to every group. He ensures consistency in the message to Esau. This shows careful planning to promote peace and reconciliation. Reconciliation. Genesis 32:20, and say ye moreover, Behold, thy servant Jacob is behind us, for he said, I will appease him with the present that goeth before me, and afterward see his face, peradventure he will accept of me. Jacob hopes to calm Esau with gifts. He plans to meet Esau personally afterward. His goal is reconciliation and peace. Genesis 32:21. So went the present over before him, and himself lodged that night in company. Jacob sends the gifts ahead to Esau. He stays behind with his group for the night. This shows Jacob still preparing emotionally and strategically for the meeting. I can't say it. Genesis 32:22. And he rose up that night and took his 2 wives and his 2 women servants and his 11 sons and passed over the ford Jabbok. Jabbok. Jacob moves his family at night. He crosses the river Jabbok with everyone. This brings him closer to his upcoming meeting with Esau. Genesis 32:23. And he took them and sent them over the brook and sent over that he had. Jacob sends his family and possessions across the brook. Everything he owns is moved to the other side. He leaves Jacob alone, setting up a very important moment next. Genesis 32:24. And Jacob was left alone, and there wrestled a man with him until the breaking of the day. Jacob is now completely alone. A mysterious man wrestles with him through the night. This begins a life-changing encounter for Jacob. Genesis 32:25. And when he saw that he prevailed not against him, he touched the hollow of Jacob's thigh, and the hollow of Jacob's thigh was out of joint, as he wrestled with him. The mysterious man cannot overpower Jacob. He touches Jacob's hip, injuring it. Jacob's strength is limited, but he still holds on. Genesis 32:26. And he said, Let me go, for the day breaketh. And Jacob said, I will not let thee go, except thou bless me. The man asks to be released as morning comes. Jacob refuses to let go until he receives a blessing. This shows Jacob's determination and hunger for God's blessing. Genesis 32:27. And he said unto him, What is thy name? And he said, Jacob. The man asked Jacob for his name. Jacob answers honestly. This sets up an important change in identity coming next. Genesis 32:28. And he said, Thy name shall be called no more Jacob, but Israel. As a prince hast thou power with God and with men, and with hast prevailed. Jacob receives a new name, Israel. This name shows a new identity and purpose. It marks victory and transformation after wrestling with God. Genesis 32:29. And Jacob asked him and said, Tell me, I pray thee, thy name. And he said, Wherefore is it that thou ask after my name? And he blessed him yesterday. And he blessed him there. Jacob asked for the name of the man he wrestled with. The man does not directly answer. Instead, he blesses Jacob, showing divine authority and approval. Genesis 32:30. And Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, for I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved. Jacob names the place Peniel, meaning face of God. He realizes he encountered God in this moment. He is amazed that he survived after such an encounter. Genesis 32:31. And as he passed over Peniel, the sun rose upon him, and he halted upon his thigh. Jacob leaves the place as the morning comes. He is now physically limping because of his injury. This shows this shows a lasting reminder of his encounter with God. Genesis 32:32. Therefore the children of Israel eat not of the new sinew which shrank, which is upon the hollow of the thigh, until this day, because he touched the hollow of Jacob's thigh in the sinew that shrank. Alrighty. Ooh, sleep was trying to get to me there. Answers to real life role answers. Just kind of putting the chapter and the verse for you. I would recommend go back, read the slide, and now that you know what you're looking for, just work with it and let God's word appease you. But here are some of the issues, concerns that could be addressed with these two chapters. How do I leave a toxic situation? So again, I think that's Jacob obviously wanting to leave Laban's basically control. Remember, I think he mentioned he changed his pay like 10 different times. So again, that's chapter 31, verse 3. What do I do when I'm afraid of the future? 32, verse 7. So again, I think that's Jacob again. Maybe not wanting to leave uh, because he had it pretty good there. Can I pray honestly when I'm scared? Verses 9 through 12, chapter 32. Again, can I pray honestly when I'm scared? We're told to pray all day, every day about everything. Why does God let me struggle? Verse 24, chapter 32. Can God change who I am? 32, 28. Is God still with me during uncertainty? 31, verse 42. And then the last one is, what if I feel alone? Chapter 32, 24. I'm finding myself if I want to include maybe the verse after this so you can relate to it, or maybe just an explanation on, um, like, basically just the answer or whatnot. But that concludes Bible study for chapter 31 and 32. Look forward for the next video should consist of chapter 33 and 34. Yep.